I'm about to show you how to mix any vocal recorded on a Lewitt LCT 240 Pro microphone using only stock plugins. For today's tutorial, I'll be using Logic Pro, but not to worry because every recording software has their own versions of the plugins I'm about to show you today, so as long as you learn the concept, you can apply it to any of them. In this project, we have two vocal tracks, one for singing and one for spoken word, because the process is pretty much the same. The first plugin we're going to be taking a look at is known as a DEESSER. This is a tool that we use to minimize sibilance whenever you say words with the letter S. And here's a couple of settings that you need to know about. Threshold means at which point the DEESSER is going to turn on, and you want to set it in a way that the reduction only happens during the S sounds. If you bring it down too much, it's going to start cutting all of the frequencies of your recording, which is not ideal. Reduction means how much of the frequencies we're going to cut, and of course, you get to choose which frequencies to attenuate. The plugin also gives you the option of a shelf or a bell curve, but since I like to be more specific with my cuts, I'm going to go ahead and choose the bell curve and then keep the settings on wide. Typically, sibilance is going to be found anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 hertz, and this will change from person to person based on their own voice, but the best way I found to locate sibilance is to pull up an EQ, and as your track is playing in the background, pay attention to some spikes in that frequency range. So let's have a listen. This is a sibilance test, which should sound pretty harsh on this microphone. To me, that was around 6,000 hertz. And as a rule of thumb, I like to keep the reduction around 10 decibels. So now let's compare the track before and then after applying the DEESSER. This is a sibilance test, which should sound pretty harsh on this microphone. Now the DEESSER has been engaged and it should sound less harsh on the microphone. The next plugin we're going to use is known as an EQ. EQ is just short for equalizer, and it's a tool that we use to shape the sound of our recordings by either boosting or cutting certain frequencies. On a typical EQ, the frequencies range from 20 Hz all the way up to 20,000 Hz, and the whole concept is if you grab any of the EQ points and you bring it up, that would be a boost. If you bring it down, that would be a cut. Now that you know the basics, the first trick I want to show you is to use a high pass filter, which you can access on the left side. And when it comes to vocals, I like to keep the high pass filter around 100 Hz. This is going to help remove some of that really low rumble that we typically don't need on a vocal. It's also going to help minimize background noise in your room, such as a laptop fan or air conditioning system. And it can be a great tool for music production because it's going to make space for low-end instruments to shine, like the kick drum and the bass guitar. Next, grab any of the EQ bends, boost them up really high, make the Q narrow, and then just sweep around as your track is playing in the background. Keep in mind that nothing is going to sound great boosted this much, but certain frequencies are definitely going to stand out in a negative way, and those we're going to cut by about 3 dB or so. So let's have a listen. Oh, won't you stay with me? 'Cause you're all I need. This ain't love, it's glad to see. But darling, stay with me. This ain't love, it's glad to see. But darling, stay with me. As you just heard, this really helped to smooth out the vocal and made it much easier to listen to. The next plugin we're going to use is a compressor. And if you're unfamiliar with compression, all it is a tool that we use to minimize the dynamics in audio. Naturally, when we talk, and especially when we sing, you're going to notice that certain parts of a recording may be much louder than others. And what a compressor does is grab the loudest and quietest parts, bring them closer together to give you a more even and balanced performance. And here's a couple of settings that you need to pay attention to. Threshold means at which point the compressor is going to turn on, and when setting the threshold, make sure that your meter is hitting anywhere from 3 to 5 decibels of reduction on average. Ratio, which means how much compression will be applied. The higher the ratio, the more aggressive the compression. But when it comes to vocals, 3:1 or even 4:1 is a great starting point. Attack, which means how fast the compressor is going to turn on, and I like to keep it in a fast setting. and release, which means how fast the compressor is going to turn off, so I'll leave it at a medium setting. Let's have a listen. You're listening to the Lewitt LCT 240 Pro condenser microphone being plugged into my audio interface without any post-processing, and this is what the mic sounds like. This time, you're listening to the LCT 240 Pro with a bit of EQ and compression, and this is what the mic sounds like fully mixed. As you just heard, this made the vocals sound much fuller and way more consistent. And by the way, if you're getting value out of this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Next, we're going to use additive EQ. This time, we're actually going to boost certain frequencies to enhance our recording. The Lewitt LCT 240 Pro already has a treble boost on its own. For that reason, I don't really like to boost the high end of this microphone because it can make your recording sound a bit harsh. But of course, nothing is set in stone. And if you feel like your track is sounding a bit dull or your vocal isn't cutting through the mix, then you might want to use a high shelf around 10,000 Hz to add a bit of top end to your recording. Also, the LCT 240 Pro does have a bit of a bass roll-off starting around 120 Hz, which means that on its own, it doesn't have a lot of low end. So if you feel like your vocal is sounding a bit thin and you just want to add a bit of that chest sound to your voice, then you might want to consider boosting around 100 Hz. Just be careful not to overdo it, otherwise you can introduce some of that background noise that was previously removed with the high pass filter. So now let's have a listen to the vocal tracks completely raw and then with all of the plugins. You're listening to the Lewitt LCT 240 Pro condenser microphone being plugged into my audio interface without any post-processing, and this is what the mic sounds like. This time, you're listening to the LCT 240 Pro with a bit of EQ and compression, and this is what the mic sounds like fully mixed. This ain't love, it's good to see, but darling, stay with me. This ain't love, it's good to see, but darling, stay with me. And here's a pro tip that's going to help you save a ton of time. If you're planning to record your microphone in the same recording space every single time, there's absolutely no need to do all of this processing. Instead, go to your recording software and then save your session as a template. The next time, you can create a new session from the template and you're going to have all of the plugins ready to go. And if you want to learn how to do everything I just showed you using only one plugin, then make sure to click on this video.